Good morning, everyone. We are in Mishna Yischala, Parak Beis, Chapter 2. We're about to start Mishna Dala, Mishna 4. I've dedicated this morning's learning in memory of my mother, Mrs. Shalamas Rabinowitz, Shalamas Bas Reb Yaakov Eliezer. Mishna Dalet, Ha'isa Isasai Kabim. A person makes his dough into kav portions. As we mentioned previously, the minimum amount of dough that there is an obligation to separate challah from is dough made from a kav and a quarter of flour. Here, the doughs that you made only came from a kav of flour. So each dough is not big enough, not large enough for the obligation of challah to take effect in it. But they're touching each other. The two doughs are touching each other. Together, they would be more than a kav and a quarter. Separate, they're not. They're touching each other. They're still exempt from separating challah from them until they bite each other. What does that mean? Bite means that they are pressed so firmly together that if one would separate the two doughs, a piece of one dough would be pulled along with the other dough. That is when we consider them combined into one unit to say, now I have a large enough dough for the obligation of challah to take effect. But only touching is not going to be enough. Touching alone is not going to be enough to combine them to make the minimum amount. Rebbe Eliezer says that there's another way of combining these doughs or these breads. Even one who removes them from the oven, that's Reide. He removes them from the oven and puts them into a basket. The basket will combine them for challah. Now, Rebbe Eliezer case clearly is talking about after it's baked, because Reide means you remove it after it's baked. So Rebbe Eliezer's case is that we're talking about that, at least the case that he used was a case where the breads were baked. Challah was not taken from them while they were dough. The breads were baked. If you don't take challah you're supposed to take the challah from the dough. If you didn't take it from the dough and you baked it, you can take it from the baked bread. So Rebbe Eliezer says, if you want to be able to combine things that are on their own, too small for the obligation of challah, and now you want to combine them together, you can also combine them by putting them into the same basket. Typically, they may put in the same basket after they were baked. So that's why he used the case of removing from the oven and putting them into a basket. But if let's say you took pieces of dough, and put them into a basket, the same halacha would apply. The basket would combine them. What's important to know is that even according to Rebbe Eliezer, that says that the basket does combine them, it will only combine them if they're touching. According to Rebbe Eliezer, you don't need them to be biting. All you need them to be touching. If they're touching and they're in a basket, that will combine them to make them be considered as one, and you'll now have the minimum amount of dough to separate challah from. But even according to Rebbe Eliezer, just putting them in a basket, if they're not touching each other, will not combine them. And according to the first opinion of the Mishna says that even if you're touching in a basket, it won't help until they're biting. So that's the machlokes. According to the Tana, that's the argument going on here in the Mishnah. According to the first opinion, the only time things will be combined is if they're touching each other or connected with each other in such a way that if you separate them, you'd pull part of one with the other. That's biting. That's according to the Tana Kamba. According to Rebbe Eliezer, you don't need biting if all you need is touching if it's in a basket. If it's in a basket but not touching, even Rebbe Eliezer will agree that they will not be combined. And the halacha follows Rebbe Eliezer, that if they're touching in a basket, that's enough to combine them to say that they are one dough, and now I have one unit. I have now enough dough for the obligation of challah, because now I have dough made from more than a quarter. I have dough now from more than 1 1/4 kav of flour, and therefore the obligation of challah will be there. So that's the halacha according to Rebbe Eliezer when it comes to challah. So that's when it comes to making the obligation of challah. We learned previously that in order to separate, let's say, one dough for another dough, you need them to be near each other. For to be near each other, that's the din of min hamukaf. That if I'm separating from one dough for another, the other dough has to be nearby. For that, you don't need touching; just need to be nearby. You need touching, and in a basket, in order to go ahead and say that they're now one unit, in order to create the obligation of challah from this one dough. Excuse me 1 second, I gotta get Chafetz Chaim. We are now in the laws of Lashon Harah. We're about to start Klal Test, chapter 9, from the Chafetz Chaim, Sif Aleph, paragraph 1. Yesh devar mishasur mitam avak Lashon Harah. There are things that are forbidden because they are a dusting of Lashon Harah. We're going to see dusting of Lashon Harah means that it's like, when you walk and you kick up dust. So it's not like you meant to kick the dust, but you do something that kicks up the dust. And here, too, we're going to give examples of where you do not directly speak Lashon Harah. You do not directly say something negative about someone, but you've said something that brings about a derogatory piece of information about somebody else. Kagain, for instance, Sha'omer, a person makes the following statement. Miya Omer al-Ploinu. Who would ever thought about so-and-so, Shia Kamay Shu'ata, that he turned out the way he was, the way he is now? Okay. Who would have ever thought about Reuven? He would have turned out to be what he is now. That implies that something negative about Reuven up to now. Did you say directly anything negative? No, but you implied it, or you clearly brought about a impression, an understanding that something negative about that person. Oisha Oimar, let's say a person says, Shizkami Pliny. Don't talk about so-and-so. And he writes, I don't want to talk about what was and what's going to be. Let's not talk about that person. Don't bring up that person to me. The case or other things similar to that. Here, basically, you're directing a comment about someone that, again, is not openly derogatory, but implying something derogatory. Now, here he comes from a different direction, the Chafetz Chaim. An example again of a dusting of Lashon Harah, but coming from a different direction. If you praise someone in front of people who dislike him, that's also included in the dusting of Lashon Harah. Because that's going to cause them to speak badly about him. Meaning, if there's a person who doesn't like Reuven, go over to that person and say, Reuven's such a great guy. He's going to say, no, he's not. You know what he did? So you didn't say anything wrong, but you brought out something wrong, not from yourself, from somebody else. Okay. And the Chafetz Chaim in the footnotes adds, anything similar. If you want to speak to someone about someone, and you surmise that this other person is not happy with the person you're about to bring up in discussion, and this could cause this other person, to speak derogatorily about the person you're bringing up, now speak to him about it. That would be avak Lashon Harah. Now, let's say you are really praising someone. You're marbe. You're very you're praising someone very much. Even if it's not in front of someone's enemies, it's not forbidden to do. To start praising someone in a manner that's kind of over the top or overly praising someone, that's also forbidden. It's common that a person, let's say, is showering praise about someone, at some point just going to kind of automatically say, except for that one thing. So you brought by praising him profusely, you now have caused yourself to kind of slip and say something bad about the person. Shoshimin yeshivu lamata marva b'shvachai v'diz kach v'kach b'yadai. Or other people are going to say, why are you praising him so much? You know what kind of trade he has? You know what he does here? Basically, it is. I mean, all this is basically a reaction to jealousy. But at the end of the day, that's the way people unfortunately are. And if at the end of the day you started praising a person profusely in front of others, and it comes out that they went ahead and they, because of that, responded to you, well, what do you mean he does this? Then you've brought about that Lashon Harah. And therefore, this is called the dusting of Lashon Harah. You didn't say anything negative, but you brought out something negative about the person. And therefore, to go ahead and praise someone profusely also could be considered a dusting of Lashon Harah because of the fact that it could either cause you to slip up and say something negative about him or to bring about other people to respond and to say something negative about him. And therefore, be forbidden to do. Have a wonderful day.